Okay, so we should be streaming
Hi,
live on
Aaron.
Facebook now. Obviously, if you're in the Zoom, you don't need that, but maybe you have friends who want to access it and can't yet. So you can view it on Facebook as well. That's the NGM Facebook page or Out of Eden Walk Facebook page. Both are streaming. Um, so I think we'll go ahead and start. We have we're gonna have a full house today for sure. That's really exciting. Thanks everyone for joining. And this is the first of 3 Out of Eden Walk panels with the India team around the National Geographic magazine article that just came out this morning. My name's Camille. I'm the social media manager for the Out of Eden Walk, so I'm just going to moderate today. And I just want to give a little bit of background on why we're doing these panels. So please check out the National Geographic magazine story. It's one in a series, I think maybe the 8th article in a series that we call the Out of Eden Walk project. And if you're new to the project, it's a collaborative journalism project that takes slow journalism as its premise, and that's meant very literally. It means that Paul Salopek and a team of are walking across the world. So the walk is now in its 8th year, and for a year and a half, Paul and the people you see on screen walked across northern India. And the article reflects some of that reporting, specifically on water issues facing India. So the article is authored by Paul. John Stanmeyer took some wonderful photos to accompany the article. But if you work in media, you know, of course, that every published story has a whole team of people behind it. It's not only the people whose bylines you see. So here on screen, you see many people, many Indian journalists and storytellers and artists and photographers who all contributed to the article and who walked different sections of the journey. And so today we'll talk about that process, like what it's like to walk, to report and to tell a story, and the collaborative process that's behind all of that. And we have a particular focus on photography and multimedia today as well. So I'll do a quick introduction. Definitely I won't be able to do justice to the full bios of each person, but I just want to quickly tell you who everyone is. So first we have John Stanmeyer, who is a longtime National Geographic photographer. He shot the very amazing images for the story, which you'll see shortly. Arati Kumar-Rao is a National Geographic explorer. She's a photographer, reporter, a biologist, an ecologist, a wonderful illustrator. She walked hundreds of kilometers across the Punjab and also Manipur, so two ends of India. And she's working on a documentary about internal migration within India. Camilla Ferrari is a multimedia visual artist based in Milan, and we'll see her work shortly as well. Prem Panicker is a veteran journalist, editor, and educator. He walked parts of Rajasthan, at times with a dodgy ankle, very successfully. Sid Agarwal walked over 1,000 kilometers on the Out of Eden Walk. That's just short of half the entire trail. He's an expert walker. For years before that, he was already walking India's riverways on foot, documenting them. And he started his own NGO. He runs Veditam, which is a storytelling foundation. Priyanka Borpujari is a human rights journalist. She walked through Madhya Pradesh, Bihar, West Bengal, and Assam. She's also very well traveled. She's reported globally from El Salvador, Bosnia, and Argentina, amongst other places. And finally, Paul Salopek, currently in Myanmar, who's the founder of the Out of Eden Walk project. So to begin the discussion, I want to start with Paul and ask him, over 17 or 18 months in India across 4,000 kilometers. There's a whole, there's a whole subcontinent of stories there. Why did you choose to write about rivers? Why did you choose rivers as your theme?
Yeah, no, it's walking for 17 months across India. As I've said in my work, it's not really a country, it's a cosmos. There are just so many layers and levels, so many subcultures, so many ethnicities, languages, landscapes, that it was overwhelming. I'll be frank. I stepped over the border from Pakistan, coming down the Grand Trunk Road, and before me lay just the eternity of India, a place that's been occupied 30, 40, 50,000 years. The northern plains of India have been farmed for 5,000 years. And there's just so much that's going on, all from deep history all the way to current events. Lots of turmoil in India today going on. And so choosing the angle of attack, the storytelling thread through this very rich, very deep a mosaic of stories was very difficult to do. And I didn't have an idea what the journey was going to be until maybe a few months into the project. And I decided to settle on rivers because there are few countries in the world where rivers so define the natural landscape, where they so define the cultures, where they so defined even a sense of identity as India. And also rivers tend to be, I call them biographers of the landscape. They don't just gather silt and stones and mud in their currents, but they also carry stories of the people who live along their banks and the people who depend on their waters. And so I thought, let me go ahead and follow rivers, use kind of river roads as my map across North India. And that way I would traverse kind of three big chapters. I would traverse the Indus chapter, the Ganga or Ganges chapter, and the Brahmaputra. And they're three very different rivers. They have a different feel to them. The people living among their tributaries are very different. And there was one other element that convinced me that this was the way to go during the time that I was walking through India, right, which was 2018, 2019, was the water crisis that currently grips India. I know that we're in the middle of a global pandemic. I know that this is an extraordinarily serious time in human history because of that. We're in a time of political upheaval across the world. But if you can isolate a single problem, this is my analysis, if you can isolate a single problem in India that is profound and lasting, folks, if you think COVID-19 is disrupting societies, you just wait to see what water shortages and water quality issues are going to do for places like India. 1.3 billion plus people. Cities in the mega millions that are already sucking their reservoirs dry. It's a problem that is so huge, as Arati Kumar-Rao has observed many times when she was walking with me. It's so big, so complicated, and so pervasive. Everybody, almost everyone I spoke to on the walking trail, hundreds and hundreds of people that all of us who made this journey spoke to, you speak long enough and water will percolate to the surface as a problem, sooner or later. And it's so big that I think, again, as Arati noted, it's just also a case of mass denial. It's just so profound, the challenges and the problems, that people almost want to avert their eyes from it. So I think we've got panelists on this chat who have documented these issues, who have looked at them hard, who are going to be proposing solutions in the Zoom sessions ahead. And for me, the year and a half that I spent of my life on foot across North India was like getting an advanced degree in water issues and water ecology and river conservation. And I learned a ton about it thanks to the people that you're going to be hearing from shortly. So it's a water story, and I hope you enjoy it in the magazine. And John shot it beautifully. Everybody on this Zoom meeting owns a piece of this story. All of our tributaries run together through this story. I'm very lucky to have colleagues such as the ones on this Zoom.
So now I want to hear from John Stanmeyer, who shot the story. Can you talk about your experience, your trip photographing in India for the story?
Yeah, sure, Camille. Firstly, thank you everyone who's here for taking your Wednesday. I think it is Wednesday, right? Or is it Tuesday? Wednesday. It's Thursday. Oh, it's Thursday. Yeah, you can tell that COVID days are just, there are no days. Well, thank you for taking just this time, because this is the time that we're together. And thank you, Paul, for not only being a friend, a dear friend and a colleague, but the journey of these last 7+ years has just been beyond astonishing. And to have the humbling pleasure to walk, although I don't walk, I do walk. I've probably walked around 400 to 500 kilometers since we left Ethiopia 7 years ago, but I drive. But to be able to traverse one of my most favorite, if not the most beautiful countries on earth, India, was such a pleasure. So thank you for letting me be here with all of you and for all of you joining. So what was it like? I've probably been to India 15, 20 times before this trip. If I could live anywhere on earth, and I get this asked a lot, you know, oh, where would you want to be? You know, I've kind of been a few places. It always is the same. I would want to live in Kolkata. I don't know why. So India has this very deep resonance for me and for all of us. And imagine to be Indian. I mean, my goodness, you guys are so blessed and so full and just pouring with unbelievable goodness and love and intensity, and just an amazing place. But Calcutta, for some reason, anyways. So Paul, as he mentioned, you know, took a few months to find his narrative. And the best way to explain, let's talk about the journalism side, sort of the pragmatic side. A National Geographic story is, the only way I can ever explain it is we're walking in one forest, but we're taking different paths. So the forest is here, and in India's case, it's a really big, wide northern swash of our incredible planet, the only place we can live. And we're walking, but once in a while we traverse or cross the same path. But I don't have to walk in Paul's footsteps, no pun intended, Paul, or anything like that. What makes a National Geographic story, or what I think makes really beautiful, meaningful storytelling, is lateral with the visuals and the text, so that we're not on top of each other, that we expand like a symphony, really, a repertoire where there's many instruments playing in a cohesion of the overarching musical lyric, or in this case, the words and the images. So I've been through most of the places that I photographed that Paul walked in, and it took Paul a little bit of time, rightfully so, because he's ahead of me almost every time, except when we left Ethiopia, if I'm not mistaken, Paul. We left together, Hertoburi, on top of a mound of goat excrement, after Paul did his beautiful GPS 360-degree panoramas. But otherwise, I'm always a little bit after Paul. But the water theme, if I'm not mistaken, was sort of already there. So enough to do with me babbling about it. I'm more than happy to share the story. Let me do this right here. Am I correct? Hold on, there's some things popping up. So what I thought to show everyone is sort of the making of a National Geographic story. I can't see anyone, so I hope everyone's still there. I also would like to mention that as a storyteller, as somebody who works with this thing called a camera, I'll use the lyrical symphony example. We have to play every instrument in a story. and or every instrument in the symphony. And we cannot put this together. I cannot put this together because I had to play every instrument without an amazing conductor. And I call photo editors are more than photo editors. They're spiritual healers, they're comforters, they're gifts, but they're more than, they're equally, they're conductors of the symphony that we're trying to tell. So I really want to express the sincerest gratitude and lifting of Jennifer Samuels of National Geographic. Also City Quarrier, who was the first editor on the first half of the story. And Jen inherited the story. She was brought into the incredibleness of the Out of Eden Walk and just did an amazing job conducting this story. So I'm just going to show you a map. This is what we show in the final show in a room with about 40, 50 people, from Susan Goldberg, the editor-in-chief, to director of photography, Whitney Johnson, at the time Sarah Lean, Kathy Moran, the online department, graphs, maps, Ali Payne. Everybody's in this room, and it's really like your doctoral thesis. You have to present the symphony that you put together. And so we start with a map. And this is roughly the path that Paul took. It's more really the visual path that I took, driving and walking. I traveled with an amazingly kind gentleman I've worked with now for more than 10 years, Ram Kaval. Was my driver and dear friend. Also Ankita was my guide, translator, healer. And of course, Camilla, it was wonderful to join me on many pieces of this. So, you know, I didn't do my research to exactly remember what towns I'm in. Usually in the final presentations, I remember everything, but it has been a little bit since I showed this. But this is in the Punjab. I'm trying to remember the exact town, but there's a former thermonuclear power plant that's been shut down that ended up leaching toxins into the earth, which is ironically next to a river, and of course deeply affecting the water table in this part of the Punjab. I try to humanize things. This oarsman, I can't remember his name, unfortunately. I used to a month or two ago, but he used to be a fisherman across this river. But the water is so toxic now that all he can do for a living is be a poleman to move passengers across this narrow stretch of the river. There's heavy deforestation going on in an area that's already quite arid. Oh, this is the thermal plant again, where restaurants or little dabas are located on the side of the road. So you're always trying to illustrate something that gives context to the history of what was, where we are, and where are we going. And I'm literally trying to follow the narrative footpath here visually of the journey. That's how we sort of present these stories to the editors and the whole National Geographic team. The Punjab is the breadbasket of all of India. The Green Revolution took place here. It's harvesting of rice outside Amritsar. The internal migration of labor, people from far afield rural communities who end up working in the agricultural sector. It's a whole family of around 10 or 12 people who live in this sort of like a concrete shed or house on a farmer's land. This is Rajat Singh, I remember his name. He's deeply affected by the toxicity of the water. There are countless people down the street who have enormous high rates of cancer. He says deforming of his hands due to severe acute arthritis. Others in this part of the Punjab, this gentleman on the ground, I just met him whenever he was lying there. He was having seizures. He's had this for his whole life. And the gentleman behind was born with birth defects. It was at the time when the harvesting or the burning of the rice fields, which leads to a tremendous amount of smoke and air pollution all the way into Delhi, which I'm sure all of you in India know how it can be. And in Delhi, especially during this time of year when the Punjab is burning, because of rice after the rice harvests. I remember in the beginning, Paul, you were talking, the way we do these stories is Paul has these ideas, these wonderful, magical, often very visual ideas, sometimes not visual as well, but that's totally what's beautiful. And it was, I remember you saying, Paul, about, you know, the neglect of the sacred cows of India, and you know, the issues that have shifted, myriadly layered with, you know, development, modernity, and things of that nature. And it happened to be Diwali this day when I arrived. This is the first day on the ground of the first visit, and it's just a simple picture, but just the neglect of the sacred cows, who literally have to, you know, survive off of plastic and rubbish on the streets. Again, you know, trying to humanize people. Who is everyone? The economic conditions where this gentleman can only make a living being an umbrella holder during a wedding, a wedding ceremony at night. A gentleman who works in the rice manufacturing industry, still in the Punjab. I think now we're in Rajasthan. This is Bubbles, quite the aristocrat and to-do man. He inherited, if I have this correct, Paul, this ancient castle in Rajasthan that he's fixing up to one day do an Airbnb. And actually, he has a Great Dane, although I can't say it inspired the behemoth elephant behind me called Elfrida or Frida, but it's a really beautiful time spending time there. We're looking also at technology, on how the wiring of the mobile phone system in Rajasthan has empowered farmers. So this farmer, now his wife is able to look at prices and commodities of their goods, while literally they don't have a car, they only have a cart pulled by a camel. So technology was one of the sort of driving forces behind this narrative of the story. Women, lack of empowerment issues in India, and also the drying of wells. This is in Rajasthan. This well is about to be tapped out of water, and as Paul mentioned, wait till, you know, the realities of our entire planet come to fruition. Of not the future wars are going to be about, you know, territory and land and power necessarily. It's going to be about something as simple and a human right of that of potable water. Just, you know, wonderful, kind people that I meet along the journey. Heading towards to actually pick up Camilla. She was joining us about weeks 2 into the first part, and we come across this massive wedding, which it was wedding season. And how often do you drive along the road and come across an elephant festooned in colors and 100 people walking and dancing? Minority class who work as blacksmiths as we continue moving eastward. They're nomadic. Middle class Indians, the burgeoning economy. We didn't follow into major cities where we were able to do the real exploding economy, but you could see the increase of economic opportunity as compared to years ago on my first early trips of India. Getting ready, nearing Allahabad for the building of the infrastructure for the Mela. Then I went back in January, and the largest religious gathering on earth, and the massive cost and infrastructure to create this city along the sacred waterways of the Yamuna and the Ganga. And of course, not only is the water important just for, you know, water itself, but it's also the most sacred part of Indian Hinduism. Cremation of a young man who died of a brain aneurysm. This is the Sindh River. A gentleman who's a vendor of toys at a festival that's going around in a religious holy area of sacred shrines. I had a really great head shave at this roadside barber. So when we do these stories, we're just I'm trying to humanize the narrative of the people that I meet, because everyone has a story, including this gentleman who's, I feel terrible, I'm forgetting their names, but this had to do with vendettas. And we have this all over the planet, but maybe one of my friends here from India can comment about, this gentleman was a wrestler and was quite successful, and people were jealous of his success, and ended up amputating his arms and his hands and defacing, ruining his face, so he could no longer wrestle anymore just because he was successful. Labor, the husks that are from rice that are used in another form of agriculture. I just look at color and beauty and strangeness. My gosh, India is just a wealth of everything astonishing. The destruction and really the removal of housing along the Ganges in Varanasi and Benares, where people are being forced to move to make they're selling their homes as well, but not necessarily at the prices that they want, in order for a large thoroughfare to be brought in right to the river of the sacred Ganges, the tour buses, the demolition of these beautiful old structures. Of course, the pollution that's in the Ganga is tragic, the enormity that's taking place. And we meet up with Paul, not necessarily walking, but he had just arrived in Varanasi and wanted to get a sense of what the city was. It was his first time to Benares, so we went by boat. Bodh Gaya, the spot where Buddha achieved enlightenment, spent 3 days trying to make just one image meaningful of this incredibly beautiful sacred place. We ate at roadside dhabas all the time. I don't like fancy restaurants at all, so this was like out of a Fellini film. It's just absolutely gorgeous and strange. There's just so much beauty and strangeness and layers and colors. We just played around, Jennifer Samuels and I played around with diptychs. Hold on, Frida's chewing something. Oh no, she's okay. I thought she was chewing a pillow. Transport after people take ferries across the Ganges at night. Sand mining along, I think this was the Yamuna or the Ganges. It's a huge problem of the removal of sand from the rivers to build construction, added the booming construction across all of India. We meet up with Paul again, needing to take a boat to cross a small waterway. There was no other way to get past it. Navigating tremendous amount of cornfields. I don't know if you remember this, Paul. It was quite interesting and unique. And here we are wandering through more cornfields. Sleeping at a dhaba, Paul working late at night. If you ever want to be around somebody who is so giving and constant, spend time with Paul. I just love his fire and his intensity. It's just nonstop. So such a giver, such kindness. And just, I'm always looking at little poetic vignettes. I hope I'm not taking too long, Paul. I'm doing this slower. I thought I only had 3 minutes, so I don't know what I'm pacing this as now. The tea pickers.
Maybe share a few more photos, and then we'll return back to you later.
Okay, I can stop here, and because I am nearing the end, and let's let Camilla take over. So I will stop my screen sharing, or I can just quickly plow through it. Let's do that. Brick makers, women predominantly do this arduous work in Assam. Jaggery being transported to people don't know what this is. It's sweetened, like a sweetened candy, to boats on the river. Again, following the river systems, more of the people and humanity. Just some strangeness, a wedding couple having their photographs taken lying on a boat while the pollution of sacred holy shrines are dumped into the rivers. Majoli Island and the erosion of the largest river island, farmer on Majoli, and portraits of just wonderfully sweet people that I had a chance to meet. And really the future of India, the empowerment of young girls at a school in Assam. So I don't know how to stop this thing. Where is it? Oh, there it is. So I hope that was interesting. I'm so sorry that this may have taken longer. Paul, I was able to eat up more time than maybe you had imagined. So, so thank you.
It was a tour through, God, just like really took me back, John. And what it really drove home for me is how much more you see. in a geographical sense, because you're more mobile, and like you're showing images, many of which I remember from memory along our route. But also, you know, John goes to areas that are, he roams, like he said, there are trails through the same ecosystem of stories. And so you saw some really cool stuff that was off my trail. And so it's really nice to see this.
Yeah, we get to zigzag. So Paul does his zigzag line, and then I'm doing this along his line. Well, I can't wait to see Camilla, so I'm going to mute myself, and I thank you everyone for listening, and wait till you have some incredible enlightenment from the amazing Camilla Ferrari.
Thanks, John. That was really lovely. So Camilla will show some of her work next. I also want to ask her, it was your first time visiting India, and so I wonder how that affected how you approached the work here, and what was your thought process?
Yeah.
Take it away.
Hi, Camille. Hi, everyone. I'm very excited to be talking today among these amazing people. So thank you for having me and for watching. So I'm gonna share my screen. Voila. So before getting there to the visuals, so yeah, as Camille mentioned, it was my first time in going to India, and it was my first time working on the Out of Eden project with John. So as John mentioned, and the visuals that you're gonna see kind of retrace the same path that John and Paul did, because I was with them both times. But the idea for me was, how do I portray India as a person who has never been there before, as a person who doesn't know the culture to the extent, to the deepness of the locals, and what can be my perspective and what can I add to the conversation. So my role in the assignment was to accompany John's images with vertical videos, which have been part of my practice as a storyteller for a couple of years now. And the idea behind the videos was to trying to find a narrative behind the everyday life of the rivers. So my focus was more lyrical and poetic than strictly journalistic. But of course, as you go through life and through Earth, journalism and history gets it, of course, it's there in front of you. So what I tried to do was to recreate and portray the evocative aspect of the land, and tackle all the different issues that we were encountering as we were walking along the rivers. So I'm gonna show you some results from what I've done in India, and some videos have audio, so I'm gonna shut up and let the images talk. So you maybe saw some similar scenarios to John's images. So my goal with this was to create a different layer, an additional layer, so that, again, we were mentioning an orchestra, right? So what I was trying to do was to try a different door to enter this space called India, and to create images that were more meditative. And also it was for me a learning curve on what's responsibility as a storyteller, what's the weight of the images that you're creating when you are in a place which is not the one you belong, right? So these images that you see are also the result of this reflection. And there was one specific moment that I wanted to share with you, which might be very simple as a thought, but for me was very important. And it was in Allahabad, Prayagraj, while we were there before the Kumbh Mela was actually happening, during the preparations. And while we were there, you saw it in the images by John, the cremation of the men who died from, I think it was a brain disease. And when I was there, I was filming the fire during the cremation, and I had this sort of epiphany. For me, it was the first time, I'm saying this very naively, of course, for me, it was the first time that I was witnessing something like this, because I lived in Italy all my life. So I traveled, but I never came across a cremation ceremony. So when I first saw what was going on, I didn't really understand it. And so I stopped, and I was trying to see myself from outside and understand who are you now? What's your role in this situation? Do you realize how you are a filter between the people who are gonna see these images and what's actually happening? And your cultural background has a huge weight in this. So for me, it was, yeah, it was an enlightening experience. It was, I really understood the responsibility. Not that I didn't understand the responsibility before, but I really felt it on my skin how important storytelling is in portraying a culture, portraying a place, give importance to some specific issues. And that's what I tried to do. This was also Allahabad, covered in fog in the early mornings. And here again. And I was also very fascinated by chai as a ceremony and as a moment. And me and John shared a lot of chai stops along the way, because for me, chai stops and chai shops were really a puzzle as a symbol of the everyday life. If you stopped by a chai shop and you stood there for an hour or so, you could really understand so much more than just driving, from one place to the other and see the world from outside or inside the car. So staying in a chai shop for me was like a study moment to understand how everyday life in India flows and how I could portray the subtleness of the everyday life. For example, in a barber shop. I'm reaching the end of the presentation, but I just I created 2 slides as an appreciation slide. So this one is for Paul and Bavita and Priyanka, who I had the honor to meet during the walk. You see small snippets of Varanasi. This was in Bihar already. Then it's gonna appear here again when we met the second time during the second trip. Purnia, I think it was, if I'm not mistaken. And this is Paul, I think. And as John already mentioned, I was with him, and here he is in Bodh Gaya. And I really wanna say thank you to Ankita, who was an amazing fixer and friend. And you said it right, John, a spiritual guide as well. And that one quickly passing was Ram, who drove us around and was a very kind presence during the trip. So I think I'm done. I want to thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and I'm gonna pass along. Thank you.
Thanks, Camilla. Do you mind stopping your
Yes,
here?
I'm gonna do that.
Thank you.
I do that? There we go.
Okay. In the comments, if you have a minute, tons of people are commenting on the novelty of your format. So next I want to go to Arati, also a photographer, as well as a writer, a reporter. And Arati has been reporting for many years across India. So I want to ask her if her process on the Out of Eden walk was different from what she does normally.
Hey everyone, it's wonderful to be back with the Out of Eden family again, to see everyone, and then all of you who I can't see, hello. Thanks Camille for hosting this. It was very different because I was walking and walking and walking, and I'm usually used to carrying all my equipment, lugging like tons of equipment, but of course I couldn't do any of that while I walked with Paul. And so I had this this phone with me, and that was the only thing I could use, or I did use, over the 600 kilometers of the first leg. What also changed is how I read the landscape, because when you walk, you're like immersed in the landscape. You're not cocooned like when you are in a car. And when you're immersed, you use all your senses, and so you can feel everything, including the blisters on my feet, which were crazy. But it was therefore very different. And what I want to share is about a 9-minute thing that I put together, which it's images, yes, but I really wanted to pay attention to the sounds that I heard, because the one big learning that I had after those 600 kilometers through Punjab and Rajasthan was what a noisy civilization we are. I mean, it's just relentless. And if you just step away from a highway, even 20 meters, and Paul taught me this, it's bliss, it's silence. You can actually hear the birds sing, and you can hear the cicadas, and it's just brilliant. So anyway, I wanted to show a little bit. So I'm going to share my screen, and it's a lot of sound. And towards the end, you will hear a song. This is a song that Paul introduced me to under a cage tree when we were walking. And it has since been something that has stayed with me. I'm humming it all the time. It's been 2 years, but I'm still humming it. And it's a beautiful song. It's not Indian, it's Armenian. But anyways, let's hear it. Okay, can you guys see my screen? Yes. That's a map that Sid made for me this afternoon. Thank you very much, Sid. It just shows the path I took. I met Paul at the Pakistan border, and then we walked through Punjab and Rajasthan, halfway through Rajasthan, and then I handed it off to Sid. And as this video plays, just imagine you're going down that yellow line, and you'll finish up at Salazar at the end of 9 minutes. And then we started walking. That was the Wagah border. This is on the Bias River, where I was most fortunate to encounter the Indus dolphin. And that's Paul, incredible. He's always writing. It's amazing.
Very sad. I thought you were gonna have to toss that propane tank in there.
I mean, I have an extra washing bag that she can keep.
DACA. You know, and for the academic calendar, you know,
Use it in a drawstring bag.
like, are you planning to have?
This is Paul recording a milestone. He does this every 100 miles. And this was 57, I believe. This was last year's rainwater. We were in the desert. It was an extremely hot day, and we'd run out of water. And we came upon this well. A shepherdess. This is an ancient water harvesting structure that we came upon in the desert. Another shepherdess. Her goats followed Paul, by the way, and Paul had to go lead the goats back. So that part was basically us walking through time. The thing is, we started when the wheat was still green, and we walked through harvest. And we also walked from the heavy hand of the Green Revolution into the dregs of a dream in the desert, where there was hardly any water coming through that canal, which we saw. And we also walked through time in the sense that we walked into the place that was the Indus Valley civilization, and how now there's only a hint of a river that used to probably sustain that civilization. And then we sat under this cagery tree, and this very cagery tree was where Paul played that song for me. Shake yourself like crazy. I'll stop there. It has been a life-altering experience walking with Paul and walking across my own country, walking through seasons and landscapes. And I can't wait to read the article that's going to come out in the National Geographic in the August issue. Thank you, everybody, for listening. I hope it was fun.
Thanks, Arati. Lots of people were commenting on the stark contrast in sounds between the more urban landscapes and the rural.
Yeah.
Which Arati wrote a story about that, actually. We can put that link in the chat. So now I want to move to our remaining panelists, Prem, Priyanka, and Sid, and ask them a question, and then we will go to audience questions. So Prem, how did the Out of Eden Walk, it bills itself as a slow journalism project. What did that mean for you, and how did that change your approach to writing and to storytelling?
Sorry. Firstly, it's brilliant to be back with the Out of Eden Walk family, with Paul and the others. Thanks for getting this together, Camille. And I noticed there are about 750 odd people tuned into this one, plus who knows how many on Facebook. Hello all. To your question, Camille, I've been a reporter for most of my adult life. And the thing about being a reporter is your trigger is something external to you. Something happens, you hop on a flight and you go to the nearest airport, and from there you take a car and go to wherever the incident happened that you're supposed to be covering. And you have a very narrow focus. You're looking at what there is to see, and you're picking those people who can speak to that incident. You're done, your notebook is filled with what you need. You come back and you write the story, and then rinse and repeat. 27th February 2018 is when I met Paul again with Arati at the Wagah border. And I remember the next couple of nights we were just sitting and talking about this. And Paul talked about slow journalism and about slowing down to the pace of the heartbeat, he said, which wasn't quite applicable for me, but I was much slower than my heartbeat. But Paul talked about it, and yeah, I kind of got the idea, but it didn't really register until we started walking. And what struck you was that you had no goal, you had nothing what today we call deliverables. 24 hours went by without a meaningful conversation. That was okay. You learned first to let go of this transactional element of journalism. The next thing you learn is that stories come find you if you give them a chance. People would come talk to us while we were walking. They would talk to us at chai shops that Camilla so loves, and wherever we were halting for the night. And initially it was the curiosity of who you guys, but within minutes it's gone to, I have a story to tell. And they want to talk, they want to share. And these stories are so extraordinary. They introduced, for me, it was an entry into a world that is mine and which I had completely ignored because, like Arati said, I was always rushing around in this cocoon of either an airplane or a car or whatever it was. I was going from story to story and not really knowing what I was talking about. It also taught me that as a reporter, my preoccupations are where the political horse race or the latest shenanigans of the rich and the powerful and all of that. You walk the hinterlands and you realize that the people over there, which is the vast majority of people in this country, really don't give a damn. Their preoccupations are very existential. That is what they want to talk about. They want to tell you about how farming works and how much they pay for seed and how what they get for the yield and all the related stories. And you realize that as a reporter, you've been living in a bubble all this time. And I think by the time I was done with Paul, or Paul was done with me more accurately, I realized that he had completely spoiled me for the kind of journalist I used to be. And now I just can't seem to go back. And that's not a complaint. It's a thank you to Paul. And I think that's it.
Thank you. That was very nicely stated.
You're welcome, Prem.
Yeah, thanks, Paul.
Sid, Sid, you spent years walking India's rivers before joining the Out of Eden Walk. So can you tell us about that choice, that method of walking, and how did the two experiences compare for your own work and Out of Eden Walk?
Right. I'm going to quickly share my screen. I promise I'll just take the allotted time to me. Just a second. Right. Is the screen visible? Yeah. Okay. Right. So, yeah, I was walking in India before I joined Paul on his walk. And I remember the time when I started my walking, which was back in 2014. Someone introduced me to the writing that Paul had done, a New York Times article. And when I was going out for my first walk, I wasn't too sure of what to do. And I think I picked up on bits from what Paul had written, and I worked on that. Over the years, my own ideas developed about walking. I walked thousands of kilometers till 2018, where I got this incredible message from Arati saying, hey, I have to drop off from the Out of Eden Walk trail, and do you think you can fill in for a few days? And I was elated because from the time I'd heard about Paul's walk, I wanted to join him. And here I was getting a message from Arati saying, can you join me for a few days because I have to peel off for some work. Of course I did. Of course I joined the walk. And from what was supposed to be a few days of walk, it became something else. For a lot of people who don't have a geographical sense of India, especially those not from here, I'm just going to quickly introduce you to this. Was, if you can see my screen, the map on the screen, this was what I had walked before I joined Paul on his walk. And these were rivers. I was walking along rivers. And when I walked with Paul, something changed. And this different transect that I was taking with Paul made me cut across my existing walking paths. And these intersections were very interesting. And we have more webinars planned from this series where we will talk more about these intersections. about rivers and water, the next one. But I want to talk about a different kind of intersection today, of looking at the in-between. I had this advantage because I was walking with Paul. He was driving the story. I had never been a journalist. I was getting this incredible crash course in journalism, walking with Paul and learning how to talk to people, how to prod at stories. And I had some free time on the side to make other observations. I'm going to share a quick few, like 5, 6 in the next minute with you. This speaks to the water story. I'm not going to talk too much about this, but I thought it was important to mention. Like Arati showed that video about the well which had a water from a year ago. This is exactly another well that we encountered while walking. And here that well had been shrunk down into plastic water containers that people had to use because the water tables plummeted. There's fluoride in the water. We did some fluoride testing. Again, I'm going to talk more about this in the next webinar when we talk about rivers and water. But quickly, just very quickly, there's this incredible mind shift in how people talk about things, how people represent themselves. And this is very different from how we see people representing themselves in urban India and rural India. So few snapshots. This we saw close to Allahabad, where the writing on the truck says, Ilaka tumhara, DJ hamara, which literally translates to it's your area, but our DJ. And I think it's quite telling of how people are evolving, the young people are evolving, and what we need to listen to. Don't miss out the number plate here and the in the number plate. So again, more messaging that I think is important for us to listen to on how things are transforming as they move from high offices, ivory towers in Delhi to villages. This is part of the Swachh Bharat mission, the sanitation mission that the government of India is currently running, and how that's translated from being about or how a message about sanitation has translated to a message about existentialism. And we walked with people who were walking for rights. We were walking for stories. They were walking for rights. So I think that's very important to remember that whatever we do, it's always privileged. So I try to keep reminding myself that this is a very privileged act for all of us. Again, talking about what people are representing. This is a matchbox with advertising of the current party in power in India. I think it's quite interesting how these comments reveal themselves. We had the luck of attending a Ram Leela in one of the smaller towns in India. Again, the meaning of this has evolved. So we'll take the blessings from this Ram Leela. We can talk more, but I don't have that much time. And just take this with us, written behind a tractor trailer that Paul and I saw when walking in Uttar Pradesh, which in Hindi says, "Socho saath kya jayega." So yeah, I guess I didn't have that much time today, but just leaving this snippet with you that there is a different kind of space that is outside. And I really am feeling this urge to go out, hearing all your stories today. Yeah, I hope this gives you a snippet into what we saw. Yeah.
Thank you, Sid. Priyanka, a similar question to Sid. You have many years of experience reporting within India, reporting abroad. What was different for you about the practice of reporting on foot?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I bumped into Paul in November 2012. He was just about to embark on the walk, and he was giving a talk about it at Harvard. And I was just visiting, and I really wanted to hitchhike across the US at that point, and everyone discouraged me. They said it's not a good thing to do. And then I heard Paul was going to walk across the world. And so I went up to him and I asked if it's the best person to ask, right, for hitchhiking advice. Should I hitchhike across the US? And he said, yeah, it should be fine. So because he said me a yes, I told him, well, when you walk across India, look up and we'll walk together. And many years later, we were walking, mostly like he's walking and I'm huffing and panting behind. So Camilla, when you had a video of us walking really fast, I think That was quite a joke. But I think the biggest difference of walking across India versus traveling by vehicles, mostly I travel by bikes while reporting from across India, is that we really got to see the margins of India, the edges of India. And walking along India's rivers means we got to see the communities that are in India's margins, and that would include the Dalits and Muslims. And I talk about the margins and the edges is because they're on the edges of privilege. Communities living with the river are perhaps the most resilient because they are facing soil erosion almost annually. They get continually displaced, and yet at the same time, they have to rebuild their lives, which seems like a very scary thing. But look at this pandemic, right? We're having to redesign our lives. So it was quite eye-opening to walk into a story and yet not walk into one specific story only. And then there were people who were continually welcoming us. We would just show up, and they did that. And that made me wonder, would I do that in my own Bombay home, you know? And the people in these margins, the Dalits and the Muslims and the Adivasis, the indigenous peoples, we would, as journalists, we would be reporting about them only when something bad happened to them. And now we were living with them, and they were keeping us alive, like be it spending the night at the mosque or spending the night in the house of someone right on the edge of the Chambal River when there's someone with blazing heat, just trying to stay alive because of malaria blazing through that person's body. It was just interesting to see how they were holding their lives through a thin thread. And we had the privilege of walking and seeing what it meant to be living on the edges of humanity and community. And I think it was, and I think I echo John, Camilla, Prem, Siddharth, Arati, and whoever else joined us, was that what a visceral experience this was. The first thing that you realize is the sound, and it's like you're in a sonic boom, and you try to get into a zone, walking in a highway, and then zoom comes a big truck, and you just feel like, wait, what happened there? And then at the same time, you hear the cikaras at night or the azan, early in the morning. There couldn't have been a better metaphor for a meditative way of life beyond a hashtag of everyday living or everyday life of a certain community. And because Out of Eden Walk is the story of the path of human migration, of people on the move, it was amazing to watch that our home literally every night was our backpack. And it just really showed us the transience of life, or the transience of what the idea of home is, especially for large populations that are forced away from home, and they are looking for a new home. And here we were to make home with whoever would open up their doors for us. I think that was one of the biggest experiences I felt. And I think it brought me back to home of journalism. So thank you, Paul, for taking us on this journey with you, for bringing us home while everyone is looking for home. And home is really on this transient experience of life, whether you're an entitled person with a mask or face mask and protecting yourself, living just by the thread on a hill that sloped down because of a landslide on the Chambal River. So that's the visceral experience that I think all of us experience in many different ways. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Priyanka. So now I'm going to go to the audience questions, and how it will work, I'll read it out from the Q&A box. Before that, I just want to say, so we have 2 more panels next Thursday, a week from now, and the Thursday after that. Same deal is here, except the themes will be different. We'll be looking at the natural environment, so India's waterways, and we'll be looking at the human environment as well in the third panel. And so those panels will we'll have different lead panelists. So you'll be able to hear more from Priyanka, Sid, and Prem in the panels to come. Just wanted to mention that. So looking at the questions, there's really great questions here. Here's a question from Ganesh. For the Indian walkers, any realizations you had after the walk? We live in India and observe it from a point of view, but walking across it and being so close to the ground for so long must have given you a totally different perspective. Anyone want to answer that first?
I could go with that since you're still hesitating. I think one of the most aha moments was learning the meaning of 5 kilometers or 10 minutes away. You know, when you ask, well, we've seen this village on the map, how far is it? Oh, it's just there, or it's just 2 kilometers away. And there was a marked difference between the answers of who was giving us the answers. The young men on the bikes versus a really old Babaji, you know, on his cot, or a woman who's fetching water. And I think both Paul and I gravitated towards believing the answer of the woman who is picking water, because she is counting that every day. I'm not discounting the guys on the bike, and for a lot of them, the paved roads is definitely development that's allowed them to get far, right? Earlier, they would have to walk for miles to get to the hospital for an emergency, and now they can really speed up. And that's a great idea of what development is, but it also means that we don't know anymore what our backyard is. So I think a lot of people have this question now that I saw coming in is, what do we do about saving the river Ganga? I think the bigger question is, look into your own backyard and the own rivulet and river in your own backyard and see that. So I guess like these young guys have forgotten what their backyard is like, or really how far is 2 kilometers. It just comes down that to us too. So it really, and yeah, I can really feel 2 kilometers now on my legs and on my back.
Thank you. Question for John and Camilla, and also the walkers. What differs in the storytelling when you walk or drive through a place? Maybe start with John.
It's a good question. They both have a sort of different dance to it. No question. I don't have the ability to walk these stories. I can't. I mean, I can, but I can't take a year and a half on an assignment to go at the boot level, the real true human level that Paul is so wonderfully able to, and everyone here has been, that has been, so privileged to walk with him can do. I do use, like Camilla had mentioned and others, I use chai shops as moments of meditation. So we stopped the car a lot. And on this one trip, we probably walked 100 kilometers, 80 kilometers. I mostly walk backwards. So actually, it's maybe a stranger answer to this question. Paul plays a role in the story, but the story is not about Paul. The story Out of Eden is about all of us, but there has to be an image of Paul, and Paul kindly puts up with me. Sometimes I understand he wants to probably rip my head off, especially with the drone, and Priyanka, we're frustrated with that. But I end up walking backwards hundreds of kilometers since we left Ethiopia, trying not to fall. But I do like to do slow, incredibly slow photographic, journalism. But I end up using chai shops as meditations I'm never going to be Indian. the foreigner guy. I'm the white guy. But I can be a human because we're all from this only place we can live, and that's this planet. I don't subscribe to borders and indifference or anything like that. And chai shops are the soul, the metaphor of our human metronome, of our connectivity. And so we probably went, Camilla and I, and definitely Ankita and Ramram, 100 chai shops over 2 months, sometimes 3, 5 a day. And I would spend an hour sometimes or more. How many biscuits, Camilla, did we eat? I mean, I'm surprised I don't have diabetes at this point. But it's where I'm able, as just a fellow human being, to connect to my sisters and brothers, to try to understand the narrative so that photographically I'm out of my car, yes, out of the bubble, because I cannot walk it. I don't have the year plus to do it. And that, as Prem was saying, is where the narratives that connect us all universally, every chai shop's a nucleus of humanity. And that's the lyric of connecting as a fellow human being.
Thanks, John.
Camilla?
A question from Tanya on the National Geographic magazine Facebook live stream. I think Arati would be a good one to answer this. She's an ecologist and a biologist. The question is, do you ever get frustrated or tired of humanity's lack of empathy for the environment and animals?
I don't get tired, no, but frustrated, yes. And it speaks to something that Priyanka also mentioned. It's our disconnect with the land, which really frustrates me. And it's something that we noticed, even people who are in rural areas. I guess lifestyles have changed in so many ways that they are disconnected from the land and what the land is telling them. They've forgotten to listen to it, and that is frustrating. And I think Aldo Leopold said this in 1949. He said, modern civilization has so cluttered the elemental man-earth relationship with gadgets and middlemen that we have forgotten what it is that sustains us. We imagine that industry sustains us, but forgotten what sustains industry. So yeah, I think that's frustrating, really frustrating.
A question from Marnix. This is for Paul or for anyone who wants to jump in. What was the most profound discovery about humanity during your journey?
Kindness. No, seriously. All of us, I think, Arati, Priyanka, Sid, Paul, John and Camilla, perhaps, we found ourselves in the middle of nowhere, no visible shelter on a Google map or whatever, and then we land up in some tiny little hamlet where people are really living on the margins, on a margin of survival. But they take you in, they share their food with you, they want to tell you their stories, and they do it with such grace, such instinctive open-heartedness that, it's probably the one experience above all that actually keeps reminding you of, when we talk about humanity, what it really is. It's that instinctive kindness of one person to another. And I think that's the greatest takeaway that we've had. Paul?
Yeah, I couldn't have put it any better. I would just add that it's in this technology that we're using right now to connect, which is a vehicle for kindness and human connection, is also such a source of disassociation that I remember walking through parts of India with my colleagues, and there are parts of India that have a reputation for being tough and rough. Example, like Bihar, places that have a history of revolutionary movements or banditry. And I would literally have a partner on the phone with their loved ones in a big city elsewhere in India, telling them, yes, I'm still alive. Nobody's come by to chop my head off or kidnap me. I'm walking through Bihar. I think the great gifts of the many of the walk is that central one of human connection, face to face, that is so essential to storytelling. I mean, I know that a lot of storytelling is done online now, especially under the current pandemic conditions, but the kind of storytelling that everybody on this panel does, to some degree or another, regardless of the medium, requires this human connection. And the walk, what sustains the walk every morning when you wake up in a new landscape that you do not know, what gives you the power to put your boots on and keep going, is that affirmation. It's that yes, the yes of human connection. And this is with complete open eyes that, of course, there are risks out in the world. Of course, there might be people who wish you ill. Of course, you have to be careful, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm talking to you as somebody who is sitting at the terminus of a walking trail that is now almost 12,000 miles. Was that like 24,000 kilometers, something like that? And I would not be here. I would not be alive and breathing if it weren't for the hundreds of strangers, most of whom had nothing to gain from dealing with me. In fact, in many cases, it was a net loss. They were giving me food. They were maybe taking some risk with local authorities. I wouldn't be here without that yes every day. It's a yes of humanity.
Thank you, Paul. So we're right at 11:30. So to be respectful of people's time, I'm going to end this session today. Please join us for the next two. They're on the 23rd and the 30th of July. And you can find descriptions on the Out of Eden Walk social channels. So thanks everyone for joining, and thanks for your great questions.
And this will be posted, Camille, right, to YouTube?
This will be posted on YouTube, and we will share out that link later today, probably. So thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.